it was announced yesterday from Al Horford and Brett Brown that Al Horford's going to be going to the bench. He'll start tonight coming off the bench. How long will that last? How long is that going to be set in stone? Brett Brown wasn't really clear on it yesterday. He said it's not something that's, necessarily set in stone, but he wants to try it out at least. And who gets to start tonight? We'll see if those questions can be answered. Michael Kaskey-Blomain at The Real Mike KB, CBS Sports. Tonight, Sixers and Nets, and I'm sure you'll have a front row seat, Michael, as the Sixers are back to action here. But that's the big question. If Horford's out, who's in, man?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. Obviously, Brett has a few options to go with. He opted with, Furkan Korkmaz in the last game before the break in the first half, and then switched it up and went with Glenn Robinson the third in the second half. So it's going to be pretty interesting, obviously, to see who he goes with tonight. I think my guess would probably be Korkmaz. But at the same time, you wouldn't be shocked to see GR3 again or even, Matisse in that spot.
Best fit for you. Who do you like in that spot? You got a couple of options. I guess you could go with Thybulle. You can go with Robinson. You can go with Burke. You can go with Furkan. I don't know if you like Mike Scott, but who's the best fit in the starting lineup for you?
It's tough, Mike, because you could, like you said, you could make a case individually for each of those guys and why they would probably be the best fit in that spot. I think personally, I would like to see Furkan at the beginning and see if he can continue shooting how he has been for the past month up until that last performance. He when he's hitting the way he has been, he gives that team the closest thing to JJ, obviously, that they have this season in terms of a guy that the defenses can't leave and is a knockdown, catch and shoot 3-point player. Putting him in there lets Tobias play the 4 a little bit more, which, is something that I think he had success with at times in the NBA today. So I think that Furkan will give them the most floor spacing, but obviously, the knock on him is defense. And I could see if Brett wanted to go with, a GR3 or a Matisse for defensive purposes.
MKB, you just mentioned Matisse, and that's exactly what I wanted to talk with you about. What type of role do you think that he is capable of having down this 27-game stretch? Because, listen, and it's not like a negative, like he's underperformed. I think we would all agree he's been a pleasant surprise this season for the most part, but his inconsistency on the offensive end has been, I think, an issue. Do you think he can figure that out enough to maybe be an X factor when this team needs it?
Yeah, right. I think absolutely he can. I think the fact that he's shooting, 37% from 3 on the season is huge. And kind of like you said, it's a bit of a surprise. We all knew, that he was going to come in and be really stout defensively. I think the fact that he's been able to knock down threes at above league average rate has been a nice surprise. I think, he's the type of guy that in a year or two, you could definitely see as a starter on a legitimate contending team. I think for right now, because of what you alluded to in terms of the inconsistency on the offensive end, I think he's best suited for, probably a 6th, 7th man roll off the bench, about 20 minutes a game, which is, just about what he's been playing on the season, where he can really come in and impact the game with a couple, big defensive plays. He really has a knack for getting live ball turnovers and creating them into, quick, fast break dunks on the other end. Small things like that he can come in and really, make a difference defensively, where he's not looked to produce tons of points offensively, which is why I think maybe he wouldn't be the best fit in that starting spot. I think you'd look for a guy that can, knock down a couple more baskets a little bit more consistently than he is at this point in his career. But I think for him, he's going to obviously play a huge role moving forward like he has. And I think it'll be that, first, second guy off the bench that comes in and can just, play some lockdown D and hopefully continue to hit some catch and shoot threes. But, moving forward after this season, I think you would expect to see that role expand a bit.
How do you see the rotation playing out? I mean, Horford now to the bench. We saw in the Clippers game that Horford and Embiid overlapped a little bit, meaning time on the floor together in the fourth quarter, but not really down the stretch of that game. Do you envision more of the same, or how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. I think the amount of time that those two spend on the floor together is going to be pretty minimal moving forward with Al on the bench. Obviously, Brett's favorite thing when you ask him about rotations and things is him, he likes to say that it's matchup dependent. He doesn't like to, have rotations set in stone, because he likes to, be able to switch things on the fly depending on, either how the team's playing or the lineups that the opponent's kind of rolling out. But I think in general, the best way to maximize the talent of, especially the big money guys on the team would be to let Al play pretty much as many minutes as possible at that center spot when Joel's out, and let him play where he's comfortable and he can be the lone big on the floor. There'll be situations, obviously, like you said, where him and Joel shared the court for a few minutes in the fourth quarter in that game against the Clippers, and it worked well. But overall, I think it's going to be pretty well staggered between those two. And then, depending on maybe at least for the next couple of weeks, depending on who has the hot hand or how things are progressing on the court, I think the rest of the rotation behind the starting five will be, pretty fluid in terms of how much obviously Brett needs to see more from Alec Burks and more from GR3. They've only got a couple games of experience so far before the break. So I think for the next couple of weeks, it's going to be fluid. And then obviously once, probably mid-March going into later March hits, at that point, you'll be looking to iron out the rotation and make it a little bit more ironclad. But for the next couple of weeks, I think it's going to be not necessarily a tryout for these guys, more so just kind of a trial and error type situation until Brett can kind of find a rotation that he trusts.
Do you see any scenario that he goes back to Horford in the starting lineup?
I don't think so, Mike. I think that, once you cross the bridge like they did, that was obviously a move that they did not want to have to make this early in his career with the Sixers. Obviously, that wasn't the plan over the summer for him to come off the bench this, the first season that he was here. But now that that's happened, they've breached the subject with him. He's, pretty much like you said at the lead in here, he talked about it at practice yesterday, and he's resigned to it. I'm sure he's not super excited about it, but he's saying the right things. He's saying it's the best thing for the team in the current situation. So, and this is something that we've talked about for a while before it actually happened too. And I do agree that it was probably best for the team and able to maximize all the talent. So I think now that it's happened, you have to, pretty much exhaust it and use it, find the rotation that works. And that will probably be with Al continuing to come off the bench into the postseason.
Well, and because, and this is why I think that it works for Al in terms of him handling it well, is because Brett gave him a 50-game sample size. It was like, I gave you 50 games to try to prove to me that you – like, if I yank you after 20, I didn't really give it a shot. I just pulled you because it's not working. I gave you 50 games to prove that you could fit in here, and it's just not working. I think the player can respect the decision more when he gave him a legitimate sample size of games to show that it didn't work.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I totally agree with you. And I think it was pretty obvious, early on before the 50 games that obviously it might not be working so well. But I think, Brett was obviously more than patient with it and wanted to give it a fair shake. Obviously there was going to be some fit questions. Everyone knew that, after the signing was made over the summer. And like you said, I think you had to give it a fair shake. 15, 20 games wouldn't have been a big enough sample size. But when you get to the All-Star break,
Michael, they didn't have anybody to replace. Like, if I told you 20 games ago I'm sitting Horford to put Korkmaz in, people didn't want Korkmaz on the floor 20 games ago. So they didn't really have anybody to replace him with. They have the two extra bodies now, and I think the timing was perfect to do it. I gave you 50 games to try. I got two extra guys. Let's see if we can shake some things up.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brett said, too, that, he proposed it to Al in such a way that it's a situation where he can maximize, what he does on the floor, too. So it's not, he presented it to him that it wasn't necessarily a demotion. It was just kind of a switch up where he would get to do some of the things that he's been, more comfortable with doing over the course of his career. And obviously he was brought in to be a guy that helps him in the postseason, and come that time, he's still going to play a big role. It just, probably isn't going to be in that first five.
All right. At the All-Star game, Joel Embiid kind of shut down talk that him and Ben Simmons couldn't coexist. He said, I think it's BS. But a lot of people say they can't. Those two guys just don't fit together. Is it BS? Can these two guys coexist, play together, and win a championship on the floor at the same time?
I think so, Mike. I have no reason to believe that they can't. To me, it's still extremely premature in their, lifeline as teammates to make any sort of, sweeping generalizations to say that they can't coexist, especially, given the success, the mild success. Obviously, they haven't hung any banners, but 2 straight 50-win seasons, 2 straight second-round appearances, going to Game 7 against the eventual champs last year. In the first 2 years of the pairing, I think, it just shows you that they have the potential to do well, and it's more about the pieces around them, which has been the case this season. I think, the struggles have been the result of, poor kind of clunky fits with the offseason additions, missing the floor spacing that JJ provided and missing the, perimeter creation that Jimmy provided. But in terms of Ben and Joel, you know what you're going to get from them. And, to me, at this point, it's way too early to say that they can't. If they're in year 4, year 5 of their partnership together and they haven't advanced at all, at that point, you maybe talk about it. But to me, before you would even consider moving one of those guys, if they, don't advance again this year, you would have to look, at the coach and then at the surrounding pieces. Again, they're both under 26. They're both multiple-time All-Stars already. To me, moving one of those guys would be the last option for the Sixers.
A lot of questions with the Pelicans, now hang with me here for a second, surrounding Zion was how do they get him the ball? Can his game translate? And so far, it's very early on, but something that they're doing down there is he's basically sprinting in transition and off any misses, he being Zion, to the paint and posting other smaller guys up or basically getting his butt in the paint before the other team gets back. And he's having a lot of success with that. I look at that and I say, if Embiid just has one less chicken sandwich a day here, I think he can do similar stuff. Is that something that the Sixers could try out here with Horford going to the bench? And I guess what's their identity is what I'm really getting at.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, it's definitely something they could try. Obviously, the extent that Joel spends on the perimeter is something that he's, addressed and it's part of the game plan. But now, like you said, with Al moved to the bench, I think that's, establishing Joel in the paint is something that should be a priority for this team, especially out in the break. I think we saw it a couple times in that Clippers game. When he does get out and establish low post position, deep under in the paint there's no one that could stop him. So I do think that should be obviously an emphasis of the team moving forward to try to, enhance it and increase the number of deep touches that he gets in transition. And I think, the identity of the team is going to be, it should be similar to what it's been the past 2 years, Ryan, when they were, a threat last year and the year before that. It's a team that's in the half court, inside out. You have Embiid, who's, the offense should run through. And then they're also a team that can get out in transition with Ben. And I think it's a matter of, to take a line from Brett, I think it's a matter of obviously, who they're playing will kind of determine which guy takes the lead. But it's, it's obviously going to come down to how those two can coexist and play off of each other for the remainder of the season.
By the way, Ben Simmons out tonight. He will not play in the game against the Nets. So I guess that really clouds a lot of things about who's going to take Horford's place, because now you got two guys that you have to replace in the starting lineup. Horford being out, we knew already, and now Simmons being out. So who is the starting, who dominates the ball tonight, if you will?
Yeah, see, this gets really interesting now, Mike, because they obviously don't have a clear backup point guard other than Neto, which seems, unlikely that he would start into that spot. So now, do you start Burks and Korkmaz and let, Josh Richardson handle a lot of the point guard duties early on and then bring Neto off the bench? That's, the one question still about the Sixers, I think, that they didn't necessarily address at the deadline is that secondary, playmaker and offensive initiator behind Ben. Luckily, Ben's been pretty durable. Obviously, over the course of his career, he doesn't miss too many games. But, it will be extremely interesting tonight now to see how Brett kind of goes about building this roster without Ben in there to dominate the ball for almost 40 minutes.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know, is Alec Burks a guy that you could see starting in that role, or is Richardson going to play in that role? I mean, obviously, I know this is just happening right now, but and apparently he has back tightness. He said he had some discomfort yesterday at practice. He received treatment, woke up this morning, still having discomfort, so they decided that he will sit out. So that's what happened there, and I know people will say, well, he played 29 minutes in the All-Star game. We'll get that kind of stuff, right?
I think that's already happening on the Twitter sphere, Mike. But, yeah, I mean, obviously at this point now they're back from the All-Star break. Ben is not a guy that misses a lot of games. If he has some, reported back, lingering little bit of back pain, there's no reason to, force him into it at this point. You want to have your guys as healthy as possible going into, the stretch run and into the playoff situation. And you would like to think that this team would still be able to, beat a Nets team without Kyrie Irving at home tonight, even if, even without Ben.
All right, we got the final second half, 27 games left to go. Here they come. They're in the 5 spot now. Michael, realistic guess from you on how far they can move up the standings.
I think they get up to the 4 spot, Mike. I think they'll get home court advantage in the first round. I don't think they'll catch the Bucks, obviously, or the Raptors at this point. They're 4.5 behind the Celtics, only 1.5 behind the Heat. I do think that they'll probably catch and surpass the Heat and hold off the Pacers. So, my best prediction right now would be that they are in that 4 spot and potentially facing Miami in a first.
Yeah, I don't know about
Get
that.
your popcorn ready.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Miami, Philly, that would be the matchup right now, except for it would be in Miami instead of Philadelphia to start things off. But the way Michael maps it out, it would be the other way around if they made the 4 spot. And, of course, we have all those games for you live on 97.3 ESPN. Michael Kaskey-Blomain at The Real Mike KB. You got a chance to catch up with Allen Iverson and talk to him about the Sixers. And I know Allen's always very excited, pro-Sixers, but anything stand out about where he sees the direction of this team going, this season or even beyond?
Yeah, and that was a heck of an opportunity, Mike. Obviously, as I grew up idolizing Iverson, as most of us have. So to get to the chance to talk to him one-on-one was obviously a great situation. But he was nothing but confident about this Sixers team. He brushed off, obviously. It was over All-Star weekend, so all the speculation about if Joel and Ben could fit together. Joel had just commented earlier, a couple hours before I talked to Allen, he made the comment about how he thought it was BS that him and Ben couldn't coexist. And, obviously I talked to Allen about that, bounced it off him, and he was, super dismissive, just as Joel was. He thought that the main issue for the team so far was really the fact that they, injury issues and lineup adjustments had prevented them from kind of getting into a flow. He basically said that if the team is healthy and Joel and Ben are ready to go come the postseason, he thought, he said before the season that he thought the Sixers could go to the finals, and he didn't back down from that. He said as long as they're healthy, he thinks that they could still hang with anyone.
Yeah, and real quick, there was an article that Dave Murphy wrote today in the Inquirer that I found interesting. It's something that I've kind of been saying here, for a little while, but he said less than 3 full years into the Embiid-Simmons partnership, where were you expecting the Sixers to be? He writes that that's where the disconnect is, that the expectations have just gotten way too out of whack because of how fast they got to where they are. Is that something that we don't consider enough?
100%, Mike. And I think you and I have even discussed that first season 2 years ago, the first year that they played together, they won 50 games and immediately got to the second round of the playoffs, where before that season, we were talking and the projections were, this was the first year that the Sixers were going to be looking to get back into that playoff positioning after, the several process years. And people were saying, this was a team that could, would be probably better than 500. They would get back to the playoffs, but not many people saw that much success that quickly. And then obviously last year they had the, similar success, almost the same record, the same, same round of the playoffs. So I think now that they had that success that quickly, obviously the expectations were elevated when in reality, something I've heard you say multiple times, it's hard for young players to win in the NBA when they're the best players on the team. Young guys don't have a lot of experience. So, I think that they're growing into it, and obviously results are going to be needed soon. But I do think that how quickly they had success definitely kind of clouded the expectations and made some of this, pressure kind of appear that, wouldn't have been there had they maybe just won 45 games that first year and lost in the first round, which would have made last year a step forward and, something like that.
Well, the odd part was that year that they went from 28 to 52, people were like, they might be the 7 or 8 seed. And I said, I think they're going to be the 3 seed because I thought they would make the big jump because of the talent that those two guys playing in the regular season would be exciting for them. I almost feel like they've hit that boredom of the regular season, even how young they are, and that kind of shows sometimes in their inconsistency and immaturity playing against lesser opponents, that these two guys who are so young and have so much growing to do, yet have had so much success, and that, to me, shows you the ups and downs that this team has.
Yeah, and I think that's just an indication on, their youth, kind of an indictment. Obviously, it's a little bit easier to have the perspective of the entire regular season with been around for a little bit longer. These guys in 2 quick years, they won 50 games back-to-back times. And not that they take it for granted, but they know, specifically Joel and Ben, we've heard them say they understand now that they're going to be judged on how they perform in the playoffs and if they're able to advance past that second round and get to a conference finals and get to a finals and ultimately, raise a banner for the city. So I think not that they're overlooking the regular season, but I do agree that some of the inconsistencies and the fact that they're able to, get up for the games against these really good teams and beat the Lakers, beat the Clippers, beat the Bucks, and then lose to Orlando or to Washington, something like that. I think that, it's definitely a little bit of them, taking the foot off the gas, knowing that they have this full ride ahead of them. But it's obviously, it's something that they need to address for the remainder of this regular season.
At the Real Mike KB, check him out on Twitter. The Sixers and Nets tonight. No Ben Simmons. We do not know the rest of the starting lineup, but we do know there is no Ben Simmons in the lineup. And, of course, Michael Kaskey-Blomain, CBS Sports, covers the Sixers and the NBA. He have here via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. All right, Michael, take care, pal.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, man. We'll check in with Michael, of course, throughout the rest of the regular season, the playoffs, and beyond. And, of course, you can listen to all Sixers basketball right here on 97.3 ESPN.